Professor of Political Science at the Community Colleges of Baltimore County. And what you're listening to today, is a podcast on the Maryland Politics Substack page. And today I have Maryland Senator Justin Reedy from Carroll County. Good morning.
Good morning, John. Great to be with you.
First question I want to ask right away before we get into politics is, why did you get into politics?
Well, if I could give a 5 minute answer or a 20 or 30-second answer, I guess the short answer is I grew up just having a real interest in history and the history of our country, and kind of got interested in campaigns and elections and politics and policy when I became a teenager. Uh, my dad was real interested in that kind of stuff, but I didn't come from a political family. Certainly didn't come from like a legacy family. And when I got into college, I just really started to learn more about the nexus between how policy in government affects people's everyday lives. I worked for small businesses when I was in high school and college as part of the time, and I um, you know, just saw a lot of things that really interested me. And once I got out of college, I started working kind of in the policy space as a staffer, and worked on some campaigns, and just really got interested in the idea of running for office and trying to impact things at the state level. I really got interested in state of Maryland um, politics and government. Bob Ehrlich had won while I was in Salisbury University, so that for a young Republican, that was a huge thing to have the first Republican governor in 36 years, and so a lot of those things crystallized in my mind. And I had the opportunity when I was at a certain point in my life to run, and it seemed like a good opportunity to run for House of Delegates, and so I did that. And so I could go into it way in detail, but really just always had kind of an interest and a drawing to want to make a difference and make an impact in public policy. And I actually enjoy campaigning and knocking on doors and meeting people. So that was a good thing for me, if just from the on the political side.
Really fascinating. I always like to hear those type of stories. My next question gets into some of the stuff that's been going on in the last week in Annapolis. There's been this whole national debate and state debate now on the district redistricting as far as what's going on in the state of Maryland.
Mhm.
Right now, we're at a stage where Senate President Bill Ferguson doesn't want to proceed with this. The governor wants to make a big push. He's even talked about threatening to have a special session anyways. The Speaker of the House, Speaker Jones, wants a special session. Where do you feel everything stands right now? And using a little bit of a crystal ball, where do you think things are going to go?
Well, I think the problem that if they wanted to, if they, meaning the Democrats in general, and we can separate out different parts of it in a moment, if they wanted to do this, doing a special session, even if we did it like next week, they could try to ram through a map, but any 8-0 map is going to have some problems that have been identified in the past by courts as an issue. There's not a lot of rules about congressional redistricting, John, as you know, but if they were to change it, number one, there's a question of whether our Constitution allows it. So you might, but even if they were to sweep that aside, or say, even if that's not as much of a concern, when I say there's a question of whether our Constitution allows a mid-cycle redistricting, but even if that was a concern that was assuaged, the map would pass. There'd be legal wrangling. There'd be lawsuits. And my understanding is if we don't get something finalized by the end of January, they'd have to move the primary date. And we already have kind of a late primary date anyway. So there's a number of sort of logistical challenges. And at the same time, I mean, Democrats are looking at states that are Republican, that are making changes. I would argue that what Texas is doing what Maryland already did for 30 years in squelching, in trying to eliminate seats for the minority party. And Texas didn't go nearly as far as our state and Illinois and some of these other blue states have done. So that's my side of that. But I also just don't think it's good. It's not good policy to be like, we're going to get rid of the only Republican congressional seat out of 8 in a state that at the bare minimum votes 35, 36% for the Republican presidential nominee. And in many cases, it has been as high as 40%. That's not good for anybody. And so I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze for them, because if they could do all this wrangling, they might be willing to risk court intervention if you could pick up 2 or 3 seats. But I think picking up maybe one seat, is it worth possibly ending up with the court slaps you down and says, never mind, you get a 6-2 map? I mean, that could very well happen depending on how the map took shape. So, um, you know, I don't have a crystal ball. It sounds like the governor is constantly trying to elevate his national profile. He's in Virginia right now. I mean, we just had hearings this week on terrific, tremendously bad scandals in the Department of Human Services and SSA. We have a number of other audits in agencies that the governor's agencies that have had tremendous problems, and he's off in New Jersey and Virginia campaigning and talking about redistricting. There's a weird disconnect there. That's just a little editorializing there, but he may still saber rattle about it. It takes three to tango. You need the House and Senate and the governor to get a map passed and into law. So I guess we'll kind of have to see.
I just thought about this. If the governor called a special session, could the Senate easily say, well, that's nice, well, and good, but we're going to gavel in and gavel out?
I suppose so. That's a good question. I actually thought we had to agree to come in. And by we, I don't mean the Republican senators, but I mean or every individual senator. But I thought that the leadership of each body has to agree. Um, I think the governor can call us back, but yeah, I mean the Senate could choose not to take action. But I'm not sure it would come to that. It sounds to me again, this is all just news that has broken the last couple of days. So I'm still sort of analyzing what it all means, really. But I
All
was
of a sudden.
glad. Well, I mean, I thought the Senate president, you know, obviously, he and I have policy disagreements quite frequently, but I thought his letter that I've seen and reported in the press. I mean, I think the legal issues there, to me, people ought to take warning from what he's saying because I think he's sounding the alarm that a court could very well. The map we're under currently is only as it's still, in my view, gerrymandered, but it's not as gerrymandered as what they wanted to do because a court stepped in and said you can't go that far. But this current map was never tested in the courts because essentially we ran out of time and in 2022. So I would say that it would be wise for people to listen to the Senate president on this one, but I don't know whether they will.
One other thing I want to ask in relation to this whole situation regarding gerrymandering is it is a major national problem. The state can only do so much, and it would take congressional action actually to fix any type of gerrymandering when you think about it nationally. Do you think there should be a national solution to this problem?
I feel like the answer, I mean, the answer would probably be some sort of congressional action, which, as we've seen, that seems to be hard to get any big issues resolved that have a partisan tinge at the congressional level. I feel like at some point, maybe the Supreme Court, there'd be a way to set down a standard. I mean, the truth is, we've had gerrymandering for 200 years in one way or another. And it's only become, the press has only started covering it at the national level as some terrible, huge problem since Republicans took over governorships and state legislatures in the 20 teens. Before that, Democrats that ran states gerrymandered all the time. I mean, Republicans did too. I wish we did have more of a national standard. I don't want national control of every election. I'm actually glad we have state by state elections. I think that's a good check and balance to too much power at the federal level. But there's no question that the that the gerrymandering wars are just escalating, and it would be great if we could find a way to get more of a national standard. As we've seen, though, in some states where they do an independent commission, the commission doesn't end up being all that independent. So
Yes.
it's tough. I mean, I actually liked Governor Hogan. No, the Democrats were never going to pass what he wanted to do, but he actually had a pretty good commission idea. And in fact, I think you'll see our Republicans are going to put forth that idea in this coming session of not the exact same idea, but something similar, um, adjusted a little bit to try to say, could we have a more common sense redistricting standard and process where there's a commission that's maybe not totally independent, but that there's at least has to be some minority party buy-in to a map. I think that would be great if you could ensure that a map might be skewed toward one party or the other, but you'd at least have some buy-in from the minority party, whether it's a Democratic Party in one state or the Republican Party in another. But that may be wishful thinking. I think the Supreme Court acting would be ideal. I don't know how that, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly how that would play out, but it would be nice if there was a standard that everybody had to generally live with.
Days ago, the situation broke out regarding Senator Attar from Baltimore City, and I won't get into the salacious details regarding it, but it seems pretty bad considering that it is a federal investigation, not a state investigation, federal charges, not state charges. What are your thoughts regarding this, and do you think she should consider maybe stepping aside?
I've just started to see some of that information, and it's obviously very serious charges, and usually those indictments don't get down if they don't have some pretty good backing to them. However, people are innocent till proven guilty, and she certainly should avail her. I mean, it's still alleged at this point. I don't want to say that this at this exact moment she should absolutely resign, but I do think if there's a lot of truth to this, certainly it's serious, and I think stepping away would be a good thing to do. We as a body don't remove people that haven't been convicted of something. And we're actually not even required. I think if you're convicted of a felony, you would have to, we could
To
remove.
step down.
Yeah, you have
Larry
to step
Young in
down.
the
Yeah, it's
1990s. Yeah.
yeah. That was controversial too because he apparently was later acquitted of some of that stuff. So I'm always mindful historically. You want to not jump to say somebody should absolutely resign 100% the first time you hear about a charge. But this is a very serious charge, so I think it's something that they'll have to consider. She'll have to consider. And I mean, if there is truth to this, absolutely she should not be. If it's true, if this is in any way accurate, she should be out. I agree.
Everyone, as you said, is entitled to their day in court and is until proven guilty.
Right, right. I mean, and again, if I knew that if this is true, I think absolutely someone should be out. Absolutely. I'm hedging a little only because I just saw the stuff that's come
Oh,
out, and so
yes.
I'm trying to be, fair. I do think it's it may be indicative of a much larger systemic problem in the Democratic Party in the state. There've been a number of problems and scandals over the last few years. Not all of them connected directly, but uh, sort of absolute power can corrupt. Absolutely. So I think it's definitely not something that we should take lightly. I think for sure.
The next question centers a little bit in regards to this in this manner. Whenever there's a vacancy in the Maryland General Assembly, it's up to the political party central committees to basically say, okay, we're going to pick a replacement. Do you think they should change that method and have maybe a party primary? And what I mean by it is this: instead of having primaries between Republicans and Democrats, just have, if it's a Democratic vacancy, just have a Democratic primary. If it's just a Republican vacancy, have a Republican primary. That way the voters get more of a say as far as when replacements are, because in the past, what I have noticed is the Senate's always been very willing to do that type of thing. The House, a lot slower because House members see a senator looking back in the mirror from time to time.
Yeah, I've supported the efforts. I think I've even co-sponsored a bill a couple times to have special elections. And I know you're asking a little bit different question, and I'll get to that. The special elections that would say that if the vacancy happens before the presidential election in the middle of the term, you should have a special election. I'm actually a fan of doing special elections even up through a certain period of time, maybe until like the last year. And then you'd allow a committee vacancy. It's the committee to pick it. That way, for the ease of getting somebody to fill the spot for several months or a year. Um, I'm not really even afraid of the cost of special elections. I know there's a little bit of cost to it, but I think voters should have a say. I'm a big believer in that. I was actually appointed to the Senate, so by the committee process, and uh, mine got a little convoluted. You can Google it, but I was appointed, so it's not to disparage central committees or whatever. They're doing their job, and they are elected in party primaries. It is important to note that the central committees are elected in party primaries, but it's way down the ballot. And your idea is a fun one that you could just have a primary instead. Um, Part of the challenge is a timing that if you have a vacancy and somebody gets when vacancy timings happen, if it's closer to the next election, it might be better to have an appointment to fill more quickly. But we have these 4-year terms and they're all concurrent. And I think if a lot of times the vacancies happen, somebody takes a job in a new administration. And so then somebody, in my case, I got picked to be the senator. Now, I'd been elected by the whole district as a delegate. So it wasn't like I came out of nowhere, but I had not been elected as the senator. And when I got appointed, I had, 3.5 years of a Senate term. And, so I think it's fair that voters should have to maybe stand, maybe either do a special or you have to stand in the presidential election is something we ought to do for sure. Your party primary is interesting. I wonder if there'd be like, no, you have to give all the voters a say if there'd be some sort of constitutional issue. I wouldn't think so because generally you're saying we're going to fill the vacancy. If it's a Republican senator that retires, you fill it with a Republican. Democrat, you fill it with a Democrat. So that's an interesting concept. We can't seem to get the House of Delegates to vote it through. So I don't know. I haven't really been able to understand why because it's gotten broad bipartisan support in the Senate. So I'm not sure what the holdup has been in the House, really, at all.
The last questions I'll ask. First, what do you feel is going to be the big issues in the Maryland General Assembly next session in 2026?
Well, I think a few things. One is, I mean, redistricting may be still an issue depending on how this all shakes out. So that was one. We may have seen that maybe being put to bed. We'll see. But putting that one aside for a moment as sort of an outlier because of the political nature of it. Number one, I think our budget is going to look better for this year, but the budget is still going to be a factor because looking to the out years, we're going to have more deficits coming. And so the budget and how Kerwin gets projected into the out years is going to still be something that's talked about a lot. It should be because there's this attitude going around a little bit that we've resolved the budget because we raised these taxes and et cetera, et cetera. But we all see the train coming down the tracks in another year or two where big spending increases are going to come online if we don't make some changes and counties are going to be on the hook for more. So I think that discussion of what we're doing on Kerwin education policy and spending and the budget are all factors. I think we're also going to see public safety, juvenile crime continue to be in the forefront. Certainly, some of these issues that have happened recently with the Social Services Administration and the Department of Human Services with young people. These are not DJS, but they're still kids who can oftentimes overlap in those two categories of juvenile crime issues and being guardians of this or being wards of the state. So I think those are going to be major issues. And I think healthcare, and I sit on the finance committee that gets all of the health care and health insurance issues. We have this big fight between Johns Hopkins and United Healthcare that's ongoing. I'm not sure at this point that that's impacting ratepayers or patients yet, but it's going to at some point. And with the potential increase in costs in premiums because of the expiring credits that subsidies that were passed that were supposed to be temporary that are now coming offline. There's going to be a lot of talk about cost. And in the area of healthcare, one thing I think is really missed a lot that we need to talk about more is how do a lot of times people, particularly those who support Obamacare, they talk about health insurance and healthcare like they're interchangeable. But the truth, and they say you're losing your healthcare when they mean you're maybe losing insurance. And the truth is, if we could get to a place where we're looking at care more as a standalone commodity and try to find a way to bring costs down, and it's everybody in the system. It's not just the drug companies. It's not just the insurance companies. It's not just the hospitals. Everybody has a piece of it that's both, and they can all argue that they're not to blame, but it's really a holistic issue of cost and us being healthier, people being healthier we need to get healthier as a society too. All of that is something that I know we'll be spending a lot of time on in the finance committee directly with those issues. And I can think of a number of other ones, but I think those three really, really, energy. Last one is energy. The cost of living in general is always a priority for me, but I think energy, we are staring down the barrel of some very serious problems with lack of energy. If Brandon Shores I just had this confirmed to me by some sources this week. If Brandon Shores power plant does end up going offline next year, which it's slated to do, it was already supposed to be offline. It's been given a reprieve. If it goes offline, we would be going from importing 40% of our energy from other states to almost 80%. And there's just no way. And the states like Pennsylvania that are like, hey, we're not really that keen on giving you so much energy. we're going to be facing rolling brownouts and blackouts unless we can really find a way to increase energy supply quickly. And so you asked for a few issues. I know I just gave you like 7 minutes of talking, but those health, energy and cost of living, healthcare, budget Kerwin, and public safety, I think are all going to be big issues on the table.
The energy one sounds very frightening. Is there any possibility of really thinking about going back to nuclear, kind of maybe building that or doing something with
Yeah,
that? Because it seems like it's very efficient.
yeah, well, it is. Now, it takes a long time to get a plant online,
Sure.
which is why we should have been doing that back when we started dabbling with the idea of offshore wind, which is a total boondoggle and waste of energy and space. But that could be a whole podcast. Putting aside how you feel about the environment or global warming, offshore wind is not a good use of resources or time. Um, but we should have been investing in nuclear. Now, we did pass legislation this last session, big omnibus energy bills. Frankly, I didn't vote for the final bill because there were a number of things in it that I didn't like. One thing that they did try to do was how can we open up and incentivize more nuclear production in the state, which I actually thought was good. But we're years off from a new nuclear plant. There is small site nuclear technology that's going to allow for there to be smaller nuclear reactors that come online and help to power, like for example, we've had the battle over data centers and other things. The idea is big energy sucking type things could use small site nuclear that also could get fed into the grid overall that would allow for a less onerous and less lengthy amount of time to get it online. But that technology is not quite there yet. So nuclear, absolutely, we need to do more on. The state has at least signaled finally that we want more nuclear after years and years and years of just being afraid to kind of talk about it and literally tilting at windmills. But we also need to incentivize natural gas production. And what we did this last session with the bill they did some things around the edges on natural gas, but it still said natural gas, any natural gas production that we're going to incentivize, meaning tell providers, potential providers, you can charge these rates. That if you can produce it, though, they want it to still be able to be converted to nitrogen eventually. And so that's an inhibitor. So we really need to get to where we don't view natural gas as such an enemy. And so that's that, again, we could do a whole podcast on energy policy, but we've got to get serious about more production for sure. And I think nuclear has got to be the long-term solution. The problem we're facing is we've got some real short-term problems that are happening like now, and we can't get a nuclear plant stood up in, 6 months. That doesn't work that way.
Definitely take the under advisement, the podcast covering energy. I think that's fascinating. Last question I'll ask is this. Do you have any preference, hopes, or dreams regarding who you would like to see be the GOP primary winner for governor next year?
Well, I've actually been actively talking to people about running or interested in trying to talk to people who expressed any interest in running. I carry a candle for my good friend, the Minority Leader Steve Hershey, who is exploring a run for governor. I think Steve would be a fantastic candidate and give us a real strong top of the ticket. I think Larry Hogan is looking at the race still. I would support Governor Hogan. If neither one of them run, I'm open-minded as to who it could be. We have some other people that are out there running. I think it's really important that we give voters a choice, not an echo. We have to give voters a choice, and I believe we're not getting the best kind of competent governance that we could be getting. Putting aside ideological differences with Governor Moore, I don't believe their administration is executing well, and I think it's very clear that cost of living is rising for families. The state is constantly adding taxes, fees, and costs to them. Things are not being well run. And so Marylanders deserve to have a fiscally responsible, well-run government by a governor who's focused every day on bringing down the cost of living and making things better for working families, small businesses, and retirees. And so I think Steve Hershey's exploring a run. I think Steve would be great. If Governor Hogan decides to run, I think he'll kind of clear the field, honestly. And I would support him, of course. I feel the same way in the sense that I think that obviously his track record is clear, but we'll see what happens. We'll have to see what happens.
Okay. I want to thank you again for taking the time to join this podcast today. Take care and good luck in the General Assembly in 2026.
Thank you, John.